The gunshot cracked through Willow Creek like a whip, sharp and violent, stopping every voice on Main Street. Birds burst from the cottonwood trees, and the dusty road seemed to freeze in fear. Rose Lawson felt rough hands clamp around her arms before she could even turn her head. Jasper Quinn's grip was like iron. He dragged her toward the swinging doors of the Silver Dollar Saloon while townsfolk stood frozen, pretending not to see. "Let me go!" Rose cried, her boots scraping helplessly against the dirt. Her honey-blonde hair slipped loose from its pins as she fought him. She was only 22, a schoolteacher far from home, and in that moment, she felt the weight of how alone she truly was. Quinn leaned close, his breath sour and heavy. "You've been walking around this town like you're better than everyone," he growled. "Tonight, you'll learn your place." 6 months earlier, Rose had arrived in Willow Creek with a small suitcase and a brave heart. She had come from Boston with dreams of shaping young minds in a growing frontier town. She believed in books and lessons and the quiet power of education. She had not believed in men like Jasper Quinn. He owned the saloon, controlled the town funds, and had half the town too afraid to challenge him. When Rose confronted him earlier that day about missing school money, she had seen something dark in his eyes. Now she knew exactly what it was. "Someone help me," she pleaded. But the men on the street looked away, all except one. Lucas Ali stood near the watering trough, his horse's reins loose in his hand. He had been about to ride back to his ranch when he heard Rose's cry. At 26, Lucas had seen enough cruelty in his life to recognize it instantly. He had fought in the war, driven cattle across harsh land, and built his ranch with his own hands. Trouble was something he usually avoided. But this was different. From the moment Rose had stepped off the stagecoach months ago, something in her quiet strength had caught his attention. She carried herself with dignity, even when the wind whipped dust into her face. She treated children with patience and respect. She had courage that did not shout, but stood firm. And now she was being dragged like property into a place no decent woman should be forced to enter. "Quinn," Lucas called, his voice steady and clear. "Take your hands off her." The saloon owner turned slowly, a mocking smile spreading across his face. "Mind your business, Allie. She owes me." "I owe you nothing," Rose gasped. Lucas stepped forward, boots pressing into the dirt. "Whatever you think she owes, settle it proper. Let her go." Quinn snapped his fingers. 2 hired men moved forward, rough and eager for a fight. Lucas did not reach for his gun. Not yet. The first man lunged. Lucas stepped aside and drove his fist into the man's stomach. The second drew a pistol, but Lucas was faster. He struck the weapon away and landed a hard blow that sent the man crashing into the street. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. Quinn cursed and dragged Rose inside the saloon. Lucas followed without hesitation. The piano stopped mid-note when he burst through the doors. Smoke hung thick in the air, oil lamps casting long shadows over card tables and whiskey bottles. Every eye turned toward him, while Quinn stood behind the bar, still gripping Rose's arm. Her face was pale, but her chin remained lifted. "This ends now," Lucas said, crossing the sawdust-covered floor. "You're trespassing," Quinn spat. "A man who forces a woman has no rights worth respecting," Lucas replied. Rose's eyes met his across the room. Gratitude and fear mixed in her gaze. Quinn reached beneath the bar. Lucas dove forward just as the shotgun fired, splintering wood behind him. Screams filled the room. Chairs overturned. Glass shattered. In the chaos, Quinn dragged Rose toward the back stairs. Lucas fought his way through the crowd, taking blows and giving them back. A knife sliced his sleeve, drawing blood, but he barely noticed. At the top of the stairs, Quinn shoved Rose against the wall and pulled his revolver. Lucas slammed into him before he could aim properly. The shot exploded into the ceiling. They grappled in the narrow hallway, fists colliding with flesh and bone. Quinn was bigger, but Lucas had the strength of years spent working under open sky. "Run!" Lucas shouted to Rose. Instead, she grabbed a heavy candlestick from a table and struck Quinn across the head. The saloon owner staggered. Lucas delivered one final blow that sent him crashing to the floor. Without wasting a second, Lucas lifted Rose into his arms. She wrapped her trembling arms around his neck as he carried her down the stairs. The crowd parted at the look in his eyes. No one dared stand in his way. Outside, the evening air felt cool and clean. Lucas carried her straight to his horse. "Are you hurt?" he asked, setting her down gently, but keeping his arm around her waist. "No," she whispered. "Thank you." He helped her onto the saddle and climbed up behind her. As they rode out of town, Rose leaned back against his chest, exhausted, but safe. "I've caused you trouble," she murmured. "Trouble found you," Lucas replied quietly. His ranch lay 5 miles from town, nestled in a quiet valley. Smoke curled from the chimney as twilight painted the sky in soft purple and gold. When they reached the cabin, Lucas helped her down carefully. His hands lingered at her waist, just long enough to steady her. Inside, the cabin was simple but warm. A stone fireplace, sturdy wooden furniture, and the smell of wood smoke filled the room. "Sit," he said gently. "I'll make coffee." Rose sank into a chair, watching him move with quiet skill. When there was nothing careless about him, every movement was calm and sure. "Have you lived here long?" she asked. 4 years, he replied. "Started with nothing but a broken shack." She nodded. "You built something real." He shrugged, but her words pleased him. When she told him about the missing school funds and Quinn's threats, his expression darkened. "So that's why he claimed you owed him," Lucas said. "Yes," she answered. "I refused his offer." "You did right." She studied him for a moment. "Why did you help me?" He hesitated. "Because it wasn't right." She waited. "And because you matter," he added softly. The words lingered between them. Later that night, Lucas gave her his bedroom while he slept by the fire. When she finally lay down, the events of the day overwhelmed her. She had nearly lost everything. Yet somehow, she felt she had found something too. At dawn, golden light filled the valley. Rose woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Lucas stood at the stove, already dressed and steady as ever. They shared a quiet breakfast, though tension hung in the air. "I'll go to town," he said. "Speak with the marshal." Rose nodded, though worry tightened her chest. After he rode off, she spent the day cleaning and mending, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. By evening, he returned with grim news. The marshal was gone. Quinn was claiming she had stolen money. Half the town was too afraid to speak against him. "It's our word against his," Rose said softly. Lucas's jaw tightened. "Then we find proof." Her mind flashed to the red leather ledger she had seen in Quinn's office. "If we get that book," she said, "we can expose him." Lucas looked at her with admiration. "You're braver than most men I know," he said. "And you," she replied gently, "are braver than you think." They began to plan. Neither of them realized that by standing together against one powerful man, they were about to face something far more dangerous than they had imagined. Saturday night settled over Willow Creek like a heavy blanket. The lights inside the Silver Dollar Saloon burned brighter than usual, and loud laughter spilled into the street. It was poker night. Inside, Jasper Quinn would be distracted. That was their only chance. Rose sat stiffly on Daisy as she and Lucas approached town from the south. The sun had dipped low, leaving streaks of red across the sky. Her heart beat hard, but her face stayed calm. She had not come west to hide. They left their horses in a small stable behind the dressmaker's shop. From there, they moved through the shadows behind the buildings. Lucas stayed close, his presence steady beside her. "Sadie will signal us," he whispered, "once Quinn is settled in the back room." Rose nodded. Sadie Miller was a young serving girl at the saloon. Her little brother Tom sat in the front row of Rose's classroom every morning. Sadie had agreed to help after admitting Quinn had been stealing from her wages as well. They waited beside stacked crates behind the saloon. Music drifted from inside, mixed with loud voices and the clink of glasses. The back door opened. Sadie stepped out with a bucket of dirty water. She did not look at them directly, but she gave the smallest nod before returning inside. "That's it," Lucas murmured. 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes felt endless. When the time came, Lucas eased open the back door. They slipped into a narrow hallway that led past the kitchen. The noise from the main room covered their footsteps. Lucas pointed to a closed door on the right, Quinn's office. He tried the handle. Locked. Kneeling, he pulled out a small set of metal picks. Rose kept watch, every sound making her flinch. From the front room came a sudden crash. Raised voices followed. Sadie's distraction had begun. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside and shut the door behind them. The office smelled of expensive liquor and cigar smoke. A large desk sat in the center. Shelves lined the walls. "The ledger," Rose whispered. "Red leather." They searched quickly. Rose's fingers found it in the bottom drawer. She placed it on the desk and opened it to the pages marked for town funds. Her breath caught. "There," she said, pointing to the numbers. "The council approved $50 for books. He recorded 30. And roof repairs that never happened." Lucas leaned over her shoulder. "He's been taking from every fund." Rose pulled out a small notebook and began copying the numbers carefully. Her hand did not shake. "We only need enough to prove a pattern," she said. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Lucas moved fast, pulling Rose toward a small closet in the corner. They slipped inside just as the office door opened. Through a crack, Rose saw Jasper Quinn enter. With him was a well-dressed man with cold eyes. "The deed is ready," Quinn said, opening another drawer. "Once you sign, the mining rights are yours." "And the current owner?" the stranger asked. Quinn chuckled. "Lucas Owley won't be a problem much longer." Rose felt Lucas stiffen beside her. Mining rights. To his land. The stranger nodded. "Make sure he is dealt with. I don't want complications." They continued speaking in low voices. Rose caught enough to understand that Quinn planned to force Lucas off his ranch. If necessary, by violence. Her stomach twisted. At last, the men left, locking the door behind them. Lucas waited several seconds before stepping out, and his face was tight with controlled anger. "We have to leave," he said quietly. But before he could unlock the door, shouting erupted in the main room. A woman screamed. "Sadie!" Rose whispered. Lucas did not hesitate. "Out the window." He forced open a small side window and helped Rose through. They landed in the alley. Instead of running for their horses, Lucas moved toward the front of the building. Through the window, Rose saw chaos. A fight had broken out. Sadie was being dragged by one of Quinn's men. Quinn himself looked furious. "He knows," Rose said. "He found out." Lucas's jaw hardened. "We can't leave her." Rose took a breath. "I'll create another distraction." Before Lucas could argue, She adjusted her hair, pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders, and walked toward the saloon entrance. Yet she stepped inside as if she belonged there. Men shouted and shoved one another. Quinn stood near the bar, gripping Sadie's arm. Rose moved through the crowd and deliberately bumped into a large cowboy, causing him to spill his drink onto another man. The fight exploded again. "Fire!" Rose suddenly shouted, pointing toward the back. "The kitchen's on fire!" Panic spread faster than truth. Men rushed for the doors. Quinn turned to look. His grip loosened. Lucas burst through the back, struck Quinn hard, and grabbed both women. "Move!" he ordered. They pushed through the crowd and out into the night. Quinn roared behind them, but the chaos swallowed his voice. They ran down a side street, away from the lights. "Are you hurt?" Rose asked Sadie. "I'm fine," she whispered, though she trembled. He figured it out." "You can't go back," Rose said firmly. Lucas nodded. "We're taking you with us." They retrieved the horses and rode hard out of town. The ride back to the ranch was tense. Every sound made them glance behind. But no one followed. Henry waited outside the cabin when they arrived. His face darkened when he heard what had happened. Inside, Rose showed them the copied figures from the ledger. Lucas told Henry about the mining deal. "They want your land," Henry said quietly. "That means it's worth something." "Coal, maybe," Lucas replied. "The railroad is coming." Whatever it was, Quinn was willing to kill for it. They agreed Sadie would stay at the ranch for safety. Henry would bring Tom there as well. That night, they took turns keeping watch. Rose lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel Lucas's arms around her when he had carried her from the saloon days before. Everything had changed so quickly. Near midnight, a rifle cracked outside. Then another. "Down!" Lucas shouted. Gunfire exploded around the cabin. Quinn had not waited. 5 men circled the ranch, firing from the dark. Bullets struck wood. Windows shattered. Rose and Sadie huddled in the bedroom at first. But when a pause came in the shooting, Rose grabbed the shotgun Lucas had left for protection. "I can shoot," she told Sadie. "My father taught me." She stepped into the main room. Lucas was at the window, rifle ready. "Rose," he began. "I won't hide," she said. He hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "Stay low." Shots rang out again. Henry cried out from the back of the cabin. Lucas moved quickly, returning fire. Rose aimed through the narrow opening and fired when she saw a shadow too close. A man fell back with a shout. The fight lasted longer than it should have. Then a last fell. Lucas slipped outside to check the barn. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Then the door burst open, and he returned, helping Henry inside. Blood stained the older man's pant leg. "It went clean through," Lucas said. "But he'll live." 3 attackers were down. 2 had fled. "They'll report back to Quinn," Henry said through clenched teeth, which meant Quinn would come himself next time. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Lucas made a decision. "We leave," he said. "All of us." Rose looked around the cabin that had become her shelter. "Where?" "North, to Henry's sister's settlement. Quinn won't expect it." They packed quickly. Supplies, weapons, and what little they could carry. Rose watched Lucas move through the barn, saddling horses. His ranch represented years of work. Now he was forced to abandon it. "I'm sorry," she told him softly. "It's just land," he said, though his eyes betrayed the loss. "People matter more." She placed her hand on his arm. "We'll make this right." He looked at her with something deep and certain. "When this is over, I'd like to court you properly." Despite the danger, warmth, flooded her chest. "I would like that." Before another word could pass between them, Henry's voice rang out. "Riders!" They rushed outside. A cloud of dust rose from the road. At least a dozen men rode fast toward the ranch. Rose's heart sank. "Quinn," Lucas said. But as the riders came closer, she saw something unexpected. The man at the front was not Jasper Quinn. It was Marshal Thompson, and riding beside him was Judge Parker. Between two deputies rode Jasper Quinn, his hands tied. Rose stared in disbelief. The riders stopped in front of the ranch. "We caught him trying to leave town," the marshal called out, "with money that didn't belong to him." Sadie stepped forward from behind the cabin. "I rode for help," she said quietly, "during the gunfight." Rose felt a surge of pride and relief. Judge Parker examined the copied ledger numbers. "This confirms the charges," he said, "and we found forged deeds in Quinn's possession." Lucas stood still as the weight of danger lifted from his shoulders. Quinn glared at them with hatred, but for once, he was powerless. The marshal ordered him taken away. As the riders turned back toward town, silence settled over the ranch. It was over, or so they believed. For a long moment after the riders disappeared down the road, no one spoke. The morning air felt different, lighter, as if the land itself had been holding its breath and had finally released it. Rose stood beside Lucas, her hand still wrapped around his sleeve. Jasper Quinn was gone. The man who had dragged her through the dirt, who had tried to ruin her name and steal Lucas's land, was riding away in chains. Henry leaned heavily against the porch rail, pale but steady. Sadie stood near the cabin door, tears drying on her cheeks. "It's over," Rose whispered. Lucas turned to her. "It is." The words felt almost unreal. For days they had been living in fear, sleeping with guns beside them, waiting for another attack. Now the danger had lifted as suddenly as it had come. Judge Parker had promised a fair trial. The evidence from the ledger, the forged mining deeds, and the money found in Quinn's possession would be enough to convict him. The town would finally see the truth. Lucas looked out across his land, the rising sun spreading gold over the hills. "I won't lose this place," he said quietly. "No," Rose replied, "you won't." Henry was taken inside so Rose could clean and bandage his wound properly. The bullet had passed clean through his leg. It would take time, but he would heal. Sadie brought water and fresh cloths. There was a new strength in her now. She had ridden through the night to find the marshal. She had saved all of them. "You were brave," Rose told her gently. Sadie gave a small smile. "I was tired of being afraid." Later that afternoon, the marshal returned briefly with official news. Quinn had confessed when faced with the evidence. Malone, the man who had tried to buy Lucas's land, had also been arrested. The coal deposit beneath Lucas's ranch was real, but it would remain his. No one could claim it without his consent. When the marshal rode away again, peace finally settled over the ranch. That evening, Lucas and Rose stood together outside the barn. The sky burned orange and purple. "I meant what I said," Lucas told her. "When this was over." She looked up at him, at her heart steady now instead of racing with fear. "You said you wanted to court me," she reminded him softly. "Yes." He took her hands in his. "Properly, with respect, with patience, if you'll have me." Rose thought of the moment he had fought his way into the saloon, of how he had carried her out as if she were something precious, of the quiet strength he showed every day. "I will," she said. 3 months later, Willow Creek gathered in the small white church at the edge of town. The saloon no longer belonged to Quinn. It had been sold and cleaned up, turned into a respectable hotel. The town council had been replaced. The stolen school funds had been returned. Rose stood at the back of the church in a simple white dress. Lace from Boston lined the sleeves. Her hands trembled, but not with fear this time. Lucas waited at the front, tall and steady in his best suit. Henry stood proudly at his side, fully healed. Sadie held Rose's bouquet, smiling brightly as maid of honor. When Rose walked down the aisle, she saw not the frightened girl who had once been dragged through town, but the woman she had become. Strong, certain, loved. Judge Parker spoke of courage and community. He spoke of standing up for what is right, even when it costs something. When he pronounced them husband and wife, the church filled with cheers. Lucas kissed her gently, but with a promise that would last a lifetime. They returned to the ranch for a celebration that lasted until the stars filled the sky. Music drifted across the valley. Laughter echoed off the hills. Later, when the guests had wandered back to town and the lanterns burned low, Lucas led Rose to a quiet spot overlooking their land. "This is yours as much as mine now," he said, placing the deed in her hands. Both their names were written clearly on the paper. Rose traced the letters slowly. She had come west, seeking independence. She had found partnership instead. "I never imagined this," she admitted. "Neither did I," Lucas said. "When I fought my way into that saloon, I only knew I could not let anything happen to you." She smiled softly, and I knew, even then, that you were someone I could trust. 5 years passed like pages turning in a book. The ranch grew strong. The coal beneath the land brought steady income after Lucas negotiated fair terms with the railroad company. He kept control of his property. Willow Creek flourished. The school expanded into a larger building with 2 classrooms. Rose continued teaching, shaping young minds with the same patience and determination that had first brought her west. Sadie, now educated and confident, became her assistant. On a cool autumn afternoon, Rose sat on the porch watching Lucas teach their young son, James, to ride a small pony. Their daughter, Elizabeth, played at her feet with wooden toys carved by her father. Henry, older now but still sturdy, returned from town with the mail. He remained part of their family in every way that mattered. Rose leaned back in her chair, sunlight warming her face. She thought about the gunshot that had once echoed through Willow Creek, about the rough hands that had tried to drag her into darkness. That moment had felt like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning. Lucas walked up the porch steps, lifting James into his arms. The little boy laughed, strong and fearless. "You ever regret coming west?" Lucas asked her quietly, once the children were asleep that night. Rose shook her head. Not for a single day. She looked at him in the starlight. If Quinn had never dragged me into that saloon, would we have found each other? Lucas smiled. "I would have found another reason to fight for you." She believed him. Life on the frontier was never easy. There were harsh winters and dry summers. There were long days of work and nights of worry. But through it all, they stood side by side. The woman who had once cried out for help on a dusty street now stood strong beside her husband, teaching her children and her students that courage is not loud. It is steady. It is patient. It is willing to stand up even when afraid. And the cowboy who had fought his way into a saloon and carried her out had done more than save her. He had built a life with her. Under the wide Wyoming sky, beneath endless stars, Rose rested her head on Lucas's shoulder. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you," he replied. And in the quiet valley where fear once lived, peace remained.